Well, late this week, the Reserve Bank's head of economic analysis, Michael Plum, gave a speech simply entitled Why Productivity Matters. In its simplest form, he explained that productivity is ultimately about how efficiently capital and labour are employed across the economy to produce goods and services. But the Reserve Bank has consistently cited poor productivity as one reason it hasn't been able to cut interest rates even more aggressively. In short, Australian businesses and citizens, they're working hard, but they're just producing less. Australia's labour productivity right now runs at the bottom of the OECD table of developed nations, which clearly is just not good enough. So what can be done? Well, this week, the Productivity Commission, which has a statutory mandate to promote community awareness and understanding of productivity, put out its annual productivity bulletin. It observes tellingly that a creeping inefficiency and a failure to push the boundaries of innovation has contributed to Australia's poor productivity performance over the past 2 decades. And the Deputy Chair of the Productivity Commission is Robson, and I spoke with him a little earlier.
What we released this week was a piece of work done by a couple of economists at the PC, which looked at labour productivity over a couple of decades, and you can break down that labour productivity growth into a component which is due to more capital you have to work with, but then also there's a component where it depends on the number of new ideas that you've got and the way in which you actually employ and use and adapt those ideas to your individual circumstances, whether it be a business or a government entity. And what we found was that over those last couple of decades, the frontier, if you like, of new ideas has been growing, but that growth rate's been slowing. And tellingly, what's been happening in Australia is the gap between what's actually happening and where that frontier is quite staggering. So there's a 7% gap between where the frontier is and where we actually are. So that's very concerning, and that's this creeping inefficiency that we've labelled it in the Australian economy.
So in other words, what you're saying here to me is in a whole lot of areas, we have good ideas, we just don't implement them. So in other words, we're not creating the patents that we need to, or if we are, we're simply not developing them into new businesses.
That's correct, Ross. So if you look at, say, something like a sector like agriculture, it turns out that the frontier is growing there, and on average, the businesses that are in agriculture are right at the frontier. So there's not much inefficiency in something like agriculture. In something like mining, on the other hand, it's still a very productive industry, but the gap between where mining is and where the frontier is actually quite large due to a range of factors in that industry, special factors. But overall in the economy, there's a 7% gap, and we really need to do better if we want to improve living standards in Australia.
Alex, there's one other thing can I just raise with you, and that is on productivity generally, because we have now a service-driven economy with a lot of the care economy. So we have a lot of carers in the NDIS, aged care workers, we have a lot of public servants, the public service has grown. Is it a situation where they are less productive as workers? So in terms of trying to improve labour productivity, if you expand your public service, that you end up having poorer outcomes from the productivity measurements. Is that a reality or not?
It's right across the services that it's an issue, and it's not only in Australia, Ross, it's around the world that as economies mature, the services component of our GDP grows and grows, and then trying to secure productivity gains in services industries is quite different from what you might achieve in manufacturing or agriculture or mining. So if you think about a service like media, for example, securing a productivity gain in telecommunications or media looks quite different. It could be a quality improvement. It could be the way in which you actually deliver that service might be better tailored to the individual customers that you have. It's not like you install a new piece of equipment and that suddenly improves everybody's productivity, although that can happen. In services, it's more those other kinds of improvements that we think about in terms of improving productivity. They're very difficult to secure and often difficult to measure as well. So that's right across the private and public sectors in Australia.
I was trying to think as we were having this conversation about, what I think is one of the more productive companies in Australia. And there's a company that some people might know, and we've spoken with them on the program here, Pro Medicus. So one of the fastest growing companies in Australia, has gone all over the world, which software, which basically analyses scans of your body and so forth, and medical practitioners can do it. I think it's worth $24 billion now, but it's only got 800 workers. So in terms of labour productivity, that's almost your ideal company if you want to gain productivity. Whereas if it's somebody like in media, or if it's in a childcare worker, it's not as though they're not working hard. It's not as though they're not important. But the reality is they don't give you a lot of scores when it comes to your productivity measurements.
That's correct on average, Ross. And so we see a lot of examples. You mentioned an example in healthcare. There's other examples in agriculture and horticulture and other industries where Australian businesses are innovating, not only bringing new to world innovation, but adopting it in their own circumstances. And they know where the frontier is and they know how to get there. But the problem more generally is that a lot of businesses don't know where that frontier is. They don't know how to get there. And that's the issue that we've got in Australia right across the economy. And it's not to say that, if a business or a producer or supplier of a service like childcare, they've got low measured productivity, therefore they're not important. As you said, they are important. They provide valuable services. The real issue is how do we get more value added out of that particular service per worker, in terms of and measuring value added in terms of the things that the people who use those services actually value. And sometimes that's very difficult to measure. If you think about something like childcare, healthcare, disability services.
It's so true. Then there's the other aspect of this, and that is there the right levers in Australia, the government level, at the enterprise level, at the financing level, to get the great ideas up, to allow Australia to innovate more, to reach those frontiers that you talk about, and therefore to genuinely improve productivity and therefore the outcome from Australia's economy?
Yeah, so the Productivity Commission is the federal government's independent think tank. So we've been tasked with advising the government across a whole range of areas in 5 new inquiries that we've been given by the Treasurer. And it ranges from things like trying to make the economy more dynamic and resilient. So that can include everything from taxes, regulation, openness, innovation, insolvency, those kinds of issues, to making our workforce more adaptable and increasing skills, improving productivity in the care economy, as we've just talked about, securing net zero at least cost, and then also the opportunities in the data and digital world and making sure that Australians can take full advantage of those opportunities.
At the bottom line, it comes back to ingenuity and competitiveness. There is no doubt. The Deputy Chair of the Productivity Commission, I'm so pleased you came and had a chat with us today. We'll do it again shortly, no doubt. Alex Robson, many thanks for your time.